Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to our audience today. Welcome to episode 20 of the Growth Am podcast. I am thrilled to be joined by Jack Norris, CEO of Rapidfire AI. Jack, it's a pleasure to have you here.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Jack, for those that might not be familiar with Rapidfire, please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what your company does.
Sure. Well, thank you. So, Jack Norris, as you mentioned, CEO of Rapidfire AI, long career in Silicon Valley on the business to business software side. Started my career in consulting, both with Arthur Andersen back in the day and then with Bain and strategic consulting, and then made the transition into software. And basically, the motivation there was how can we bring software and the insights delivered from that to companies to do it much more efficiently. And so early on, I was on the analytics side, and then I went into cloud and virtualization and big data, and then ultimately did some consulting in AI, and then got connected with a professor out of UC San Diego who'd been doing this for a number of years and looking at breakthroughs. And that's really how Rapidfire got started, is the union of both the business side and this just great technology. And the focus, we'll delve into that during this session, but the focus is really how do you make the average data scientist and AI engineer and application developer just much more effective of bringing the data and the models to bear for their specific applications. And right now it's a very vibe, random walk that we're trying to make structured, complete, and more predictable.
Perfect. By the way, your background is fascinating because we do have the Arthur Andersen Accenture in common, and clearly Rapidfire is at the forefront of AI innovation. What are some of the key industry trends that you're seeing right now, especially concerning AI agents?
Well, first of all, I have to start with it's always about the data. It's been about the data since we started, and AI doesn't really change that. That said, if you look at AI and where we are now and the trends, there's really two big drivers that are here in 2026. One is it's about agentic workflows, and two, it's a focus on the outcomes. How are you achieving an outcome that's measurable and impactful? This isn't the year of the prototypes.
For sure. You'd mentioned, what worked yesterday with AI models doesn't necessarily work today, and even upgrades can change performance. This brings up an interesting point about non-deterministic nature of current AI development.
Yeah, it, that's what's different about say application development now than back in the day when we were consulting. And it's ultimately how do you bring to bear kind of the advantage that you have and get the most out of AI. And so we're enamored with the models, the number of models, and the big steps that they're making and going forward, and that's fantastic. But that's not what's going to drive the competitive advantage for an organization. It's not just the underlying power of the model. It's basically how they can leverage their data and their insights and their kind of unique position in combination with that model. And that's really the starting point. And, if I were to summarize our focus at Rapidfire AI, it's about outcome engineering. It's how do you start with the objective that you're after, and how do you get that as quickly and as efficiently and as transparently as possible. And that's really what we've kind of looked at and really started from the ground principles in terms of what do you need to have in place to make that happen.
For sure. So, given these rapidly evolving trends, what are some of the biggest challenges you see businesses facing when trying to implement AI solution, particularly with agents?
Well, the three big challenges are number one, complexity. Complexity continues to accelerate, especially as you look at agentic workflows. As originally, if we're looking at just a chat bot, it had its own kind of complexity. But then if you add an agentic workflow, and even if you're 90% accurate in terms of the application, after just a few steps, 90%, you're basically at a coin flip or worse. So how do you kind of manage that complexity? Secondly, it's about the skills gap, and it's a real challenge for organizations. IBM did a study recently where they asked practitioners, how confident are you in your AI capabilities? And 24% said they were confident. now they're the front line that's being tasked to do some of the work with this generative AI. And I mentioned the data, and when it comes to really getting the outcome that you want, there's a lot of knobs to turn. And there's a customization spectrum for LLM. At the very beginning, it's just prompts. What's my prompt structure, and which prompt structure gives a better result? And then it's how do I leverage my data? And there's pre-processing steps, and there's retriever steps, and there's different context windows and chunkers and so forth. A lot of knobs to turn, even if it's doing simple RAG. And then there's the model behavior itself, and the fine tuning and different approaches and GRPO, et cetera. And then there's the post training. So you've got this huge spectrum out there, and each step has kind of a different stack associated with it. Our focus is to provide a consistent interface, regardless of what you're doing, regardless of the knobs, and make that kind of practitioner much more effective. A combination of automation. If you're able to see multiple configurations running at once, you get a lot more insight. It's a lot easier to say, these are low performers. Let's stop. Let's kill those, not dedicate any more resources to them, and look at these high performers. Now let's clone and modify. Let's do some variations and see if I can't squeeze additional performance. Ultimately, what outcome engineering is about is trying to balance out what I'm trying to do with the trade-offs in front of me, because it's basically solving across a Pareto frontier. There's a lot of different combinations, and those combinations are going to give you a certain cost level, a certain accuracy level, a certain latency level, a certain risk level in terms of private information leakage or hallucination, et cetera. And so that's what makes this difficult, is how do you manage those trade-offs effectively, and how do you do so that's not challenging to some of these practitioners and not cost prohibitive, because you're trying to do a lot of combination checking.
For sure. So you've definitely highlighted the need for a different approach instead of just building agents. What else can you elaborate on what outcome engineering means to somebody that's getting started on their AI journey, or even somebody that's a little more advanced, and how does it address these challenges?
So, yeah, I don't want to throw another term out there, but outcome engineering is in contrast to kind of the state now, the typical state. It's kind of a vibe check. It's kind of a random walk. It kind of matters where you start. And sometimes that start point is you're asking, Claude, what combination should I put? And you're starting there, and you're doing a few configurations, and then you go, well, I guess that's the high point. And what outcome engineering, it's really trying to balance across what are you trying to do with the permutations that you're selecting, and doing it in a way that's very efficient, and taking the information of not only what's working but what didn't work to inform the solution. And one great example is a customer of ours that was doing an AI application and had done just a handful of configurations, and then with Rapidfire in the same environment, the same resources, did 2,000 comparisons and got a high bar, and got the accuracy and the performance and the cost level that they were.
Yeah. No, that sounds like a very powerful concept, and that there may be some trade-offs to be balanced when it comes to outcome engineering. What what's driving the underlying need to make config changes, and why don't these powerful models perform out of the gate?
Yeah, so for some applications, they work well. Particularly if let's take a chat bot. If it's a simple chat bot that's fairly close to the data that was used to train the model, so kind of maybe a consumer chat bot that's dealing with a lot of available public data, then it might be very close. But invariably, applications that are more mission critical and more domain specific and more about leveraging a company's own data, then that model that was trained on internet data is not adequately reflecting what needs to be done. And there's a lot more dark data in the
Yeah.
world than public information. So that's where these techniques in terms of augmented retrieval, techniques, et cetera, that need to be tuned, because there's a huge difference in performance depending on some of those decisions you make. And there's almost more knobs to turn in a RAG approach than in a fine tuning approach. So that's kind of where the need for this came from. It's to leverage the data and leverage the performance effectively for these specific applications.
Sure. So it looks like the key is harnessing that private data, and this resonates with the idea of preventing hallucinations and drawing better boundaries, which is often associated with RAG methodology. So while some say RAG is dead, it seems like the underlying principles of retrieval augmentation and knowledge graphs are still critical, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are similar types of processes, only now you're leveraging a knowledge graph, right? So let's just take a step back and basically it's how do I best make the model performance and the data leverage as effective as possible and take into account where that information is coming from and how it's being processed and handled. So those are where the knobs and the specific type of knobs, whether it's hyperparameters or uh, model architectures or data chunking or re-rankers, retrievers. There's a whole host of those that can be adjusted and brought to bear to drive the result that you need. I guess it very simply kind of comes back down to the data, right? Are you using the right data and are you getting the most out of it?
So, Jack, one of the challenges you identified earlier is the talent gap, right? What does this mean for outcome engineering?
So right now there's a big premium in terms of do you know where to start, and even a premium in terms of do you know when to stop. And
Yeah.
so each step along that way is an experiment in terms of, well, these are the settings I'll do. And if it's more on the agent and the RAG side, it's like, well, these are my data strategies and these are the knobs I'm going to turn, et cetera. And then you kind of rinse and repeat. You go through that process, and each time you're either spending tokens or you're, driving GPU expense. And each time you're kind of looking and see, well, what was that result? And is it getting better? Is it getting worse? And when do I stop? Did I achieve the high bar that there's many reports out there and different studies that kind of come down to the fact that there's a gap between prototypes and production. Some reports are saying 80% of prototypes are just stuck and not moving on to production. And we've talked with customers that say, well, yeah, I'm doing internal ones, but I don't trust the system enough for kind of external facing applications. I'm worried about the risk associated with our reputation or customer experience, et cetera, that could be negative. So the ability to really make sure that those outcomes are engineered properly is a high bar. So that's the kind of state we're in now. And what it means with a rapid fire approach is that you can be relatively inexperienced. And what you're doing is you're kind of looking at the search space and you're saying, well, this is kind of what I'm after. And then we'll fill in the configurations and start and immediately show you the results. So you don't have to complete a whole process. You can look at subsets of the data running within the kind of first epoch, and you can quickly see what's low performing and not. And we provide confidence levels based on that data sharding, so you can quickly stop and not devote resources to these losing propositions. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you can clone and then modify and do some variations to see what would change by if I change that just a little bit higher, a little bit lower there, and you're getting kind of feedback and you're seeing the results. And this can be a human in the loop, and it can be an automated procedure depending on your kind of situation and the operator. The end result, though, is you're you're kind of taking that premium out in terms of really understanding things and using the kind of competition of these configurations to kind of drive things. And then the data is being tracked at every step of the way. And all of that data together means that the ability to understand, well, what was driving a result and what was not driving a result can help you better understand the sensitivity of certain things and understand, well, for this application, what's contributing the most for the results that we see.
With the concept of outcome engineering, right? Are there any use cases that our audience can relate to when it comes to those AI practitioners that Rapid Fire has been able to really help go that final mile or the extra mile, however, wherever they were in their life cycle? If you could,
Yeah. In fact, I'm glad you touched on that. So we spent a lot of resources to make this accessible. Number one, We have an open source platform. So the ability for people to get their hands on it and experiment is very low bar, very easy for them to do so. And we've done some things to make that even easier. With Hugging Face, we're integrated into TRL. So they can use Rapidfire in conjunction with any of the virtually millions of models that are out there and available. We've also spent some time to create some sample notebooks, chat bots and scientific research, kind of a Q&A type of thing, healthcare. We even sponsored an LLM experimentation competition this past winter, and had 300 registrants, and we included 20, 25 of those examples winners in the competition, put those in the open source repository. So things like a PII, how you protect privacy information, healthcare chatbot, financial intelligence, and showing how the experimentation got a much higher accuracy result and did so much more efficiently. And some of the comments there were really, really powerful in terms of the participants saying how it changed things, how it was so much easier for them to get a result and to compare quickly across different examples. And
Yeah.
I think that those starting points can help people as they look at, am I trying to roll something out in retail and make sure that there's an application out there that is helping identify and speed the review and the shopping practice? Is there things in cybersecurity in terms of how do you identify and how do you have an adversarial opponent to
Sure.
some of the threats that are out there, et cetera? In many of these applications, customers are developing they want to do it on their private information and keep those details to themselves. So that's where some of these starting points and samples are a great way to get started. But of course, a lot of these applications are proprietary.
Yeah. And I think this would play well in environment and HIPAA type of regulations are a lot more prevalent where the compute and anything associated data can't leave.
And the flip side of that is also true, because it puts even more emphasis on, given that information, how do you make sure you're leveraging it properly and leveraging it effectively? And that's where the settings, the trade-offs, the capabilities you're doing absolutely feed into the trust and governance side of the equation, as well as the effectiveness and efficiency side.
For sure. So when you mentioned some of these comparative type of examples with just a few minutes ago, you're saying it goes beyond A/B testing, where you can compare it across whether it's and I'm stepping out of my technical boundaries here. Is it going across different MCP servers, different LLMs, and then comparing it with what they're achieving or what they're accomplishing via the rapid fire framework?
Yeah. So if I understood you, asking, we've been talking about the knobs within a model, if you will, but no, we have customers that are comparing across models, and they're saying one consulting company is basically they want to have a collection of models that are tuned to specific things and use that as a starting point, and then do the kind of last mile customization for the specific use case. If, for instance, cost is an issue, well, here's the kind of smallest model.
Mhm.
It's going to cost the least amount of resources to pursue this application, and then they do the final trade-offs for that specific customer and use case. Some of those are looking at more about privacy and latency, and all of them are kind of tuned for specific things. IBM's done a lot of that with the Granite models in terms of having SLMs that are domain and function specific. And I guess where Rapidfire fits is just using those as a starting point, but customizing even further.
So, Jack, you mentioned some collaboration that you've done with UCSD. Can you elaborate a little bit about that in case we've got some folks that are watching this that are more in that education or structured AI learning process and how this may benefit them?
Sure. So um, a co-founder and our CTO, Arun Kumar, is a professor at UC San Diego, both in the Department of Computer Science Engineering, as well as one of the founding faculty members of the Data Science Institute. So yeah, there's a lot of UCSD influence and impact on the company, and we have taken advantage. And some of our employees, our background is master's students from UCSD. They're particularly effective. We've done some things with other campuses as well. We had multiple campuses involved in the LLM experimentation. There's been a hackathon out of UC Santa Barbara. We've got basically institutions across the world that are kind of reaching out to take advantage of Rapidfire as part of their labs and part of their classroom experience. And that vertical kind of fits right in terms of thriving, kind of the leading edge and doing experimentation and how to do that effectively with limited amount of resources. We're a perfect solution for that.
Yeah. That's great. So wonderful concepts. I'm definitely learning a lot talking to industry leaders such as yourself, and so I'm excited to see where this goes. And so, while we're talking about the future, looking ahead, where do you see Rapid Fire in the next 6 to 12 months, and also your long term vision for outcome engineering and role of AI in business?
So we've just scratched the surface and things are moving really quickly. We've got kind of a rich roadmap in front of us. In fact, very shortly we'll have some big announcements that further propel us forward. So I guess watch this space, and we'll have some good news to share here quickly. I will point out that in this discussion we focused a lot on the creation of these applications and how do you get them to the level that they're performing. But the thing about AI applications is that they're not like the traditional software development where you've kind of ship it and you need to revisit it when large things change. Oh, it's a new hardware
Right.
platform or the APIs are different. With AI based systems, you've got drift, you've got changes in the underlying models, you've got changes in the data, you've got changes in kind of the customer behavior that require a revisiting and additional tuning, additional changes to make sure that it's still performing at the level you need to perform. And so what we're seeing is that there's a role for this solution. There's a role for rapid fire even after you're in production, even after you're kind of running inference. So you've got observability platforms that are looking, and when you've got changes in cost or latency or hallucinations, et cetera, that warrant a change, there can be automation loop that's rapid fire is part of, that's helping to suggest and find and engineer better outcomes than what the current model is performing. And I think we're seeing some customers at that level, but in general, the industry's moving in that direction, and we'll be there much sooner than we think.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, so it sounds like you're empowering data scientists to dive in and make tweaks while also providing a wrapper for those with full experience. This approach of combining, human insight with AI efficiency is truly innovative. Um, let's let's talk about a fun one, right? If you had a magic wand, what is the one thing you would fix in your business that is holding you back or slowing you down?
Yeah, I mean, the good news is this is an area that's extremely valued, and there's a lot of innovations and there's a lot of excitement, but there's also a lot of noise that goes with that. So I guess the first place I'd apply the magic wand is just making sure that the visibility and kind of awareness of what rapid fire brings is more fully understood. And I guess maybe we've already kind of waved that a little bit. That's how we got to you introduced, and this podcast is part of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, Jack, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation. So thank you for sharing your expertise and on engineering and the future of AI agents. Before we close, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience?
I mentioned that rapid fire is based on open source, so you can go to our website and get the links to GitHub, and we've got collab versions that you can run for free there. And as I mentioned, these examples are available, so it's a great place to start. And get information. We've spent a lot of time in our documentation to make it easy to understand where to start. And of course, we've got a pretty vibrant Discord community that you can join to get, further insight and help. So yeah, I just want to add this has been a great experience. Thanks so much for the invitation and the chance to talk about AI and outcome engineering.
Well, the pleasure is mine, and I'm sure a lot of folks are going to be very curious about exploring more into outcome engineering, and we're happy to socialize the message and lend a hand to get it out there. So, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.